We now go to Tripoli, where we're joined by Peter Beaumont, Foreign Affairs Editor at the London Observer. Welcome to Democracy Now! Peter, describe Tripoli right now.
The funny thing is, and despite what you read, actually, Tripoli is very, very calm. I mean, the city centre, there's lots of traffic. I mean, there are queues at food shops and some of the banks. I mean, the problems here are the ones you don't tend to see so much. I went out last night to Jura, which is one of the big working class neighborhoods out on the east of the city, where there's currently a clampdown going on the people who are involved in the opposition demonstrations. There seem to be nightly roundups of people who've been identified as going on these demonstrations. And while a lot of the city feels calm, these areas are very, very fearful right now.
And Peter, could you tell us about this, the latest appearance of Gaddafi, the 3-hour-long speech that he gave to both international reporters and some of his supporters in Tripoli?
Yeah, I was at that yesterday. I mean, it was a lot less hot-headed than some of the couple of the previous speeches he'd made. I mean, what he was clearly trying to set out to do was press a lot of buttons with not just people who are his supporters, but people who might be his supporters. I mean, he, despite a lot of the rhetoric that you might expect, that it was quite, bellicose, studied in this very, very long speech were, what I'd call quite a lot of goodies. I mean, he was making an offer of increasing financial aid for people who wanted to build houses. He made a nod towards things like free speech and a constitution, which his son Saif al-Islam has been trying to push on him. So, I mean, it was very, very carefully produced. On the one hand, he was appealing to nationalistic sentiment, saying, if there's intervention, we'll create another Vietnam here. While on the other hand, he was talking very much to some of the concerns of Libyans and some of the Libyans who are actually opposing him, trying to say, well, maybe, it should be doing something slightly different. Although whether people will believe him after all these years is the biggest question.
And didn't he also offer billions in additional government aid to the rebel areas that are now have slipped from his control?
He both offered an amnesty, which he'd hinted at before, but I mean, he spoke twice yesterday in this long speech about an amnesty for people who've taken up arms. I mean, the government line is that this aid has been an offer for a long time, but I mean, essentially, what he was offering was $20 billion for infrastructure aid to Benghazi if and when things calmed down, there was some kind of reconciliation. But the truth is, I mean, people have heard promises before, and I'm not sure that people listening in the east of this speech will put any credibility in it.
Peter Beaumont, right now you have a minder. How do reporters function in Tripoli?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, talking to friends who spent a lot of time here before, who were on a previous occasion not even able to leave the hotel. I mean, there are minders. They organise trips to places which are not always, the outcomes of those trips not always going as well as they'd like. In theory, you're not supposed to go anywhere without a minder, but I mean, several of my colleagues have managed to go and do independent reporting. And I've managed to do some independent reporting myself. I mean, one example is we were taken on Sunday to Zawiya, which is described as this kind of key opposition-held town about 30 kilometers from Tripoli. I mean, in fact, it's only the centre of the town that's held by the opposition. And when we arrived there, we were told, there's guys with guns down there, and I don't think they expected us to go, oh, really, and then wander off and go and meet the guys with guns. And so, even though there's control, I mean, it's not as much as you'd expect. I mean, most days we get taken to these staged demonstrations, and you'll be in this demonstration, everyone's cheering and sort of saying, God and Muammar is all that Libya needs, and then someone will come up and whisper in your ear and say, do you speak English? I want to have a word with you. And then, bizarrely, you'll find yourself in the middle of a
Peter?
With someone who's saying, actually, some of the people who are here, actually are against him. They've just been paid. And so, I mean, it's controlled, but like all things that try to control, one finds one's way around it.
Very quickly, this news that Al Jazeera is reporting Gaddafi's accepted an offer from Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez to mediate a solution to what's happening. What do you understand about this?
All I understand is that it's already been rejected by the opposition leaders in the East. So, I mean, you know, there is a history of reasonably friendly relations between Hugo Chavez and Colonel Gaddafi. But I mean, you know, the mediation is only possible if the other party is prepared to be a part of that mediation. And right now, I don't think there's any possibility of that at all.
And is there any sense of the impact on the oil production in Libya? Obviously, some reports say that's about 50% down since the rebellion began. The possible impact on the government of the sharp reduction in oil revenues.
Well, I mean, what we know so far is what we hear from government sources who are pretty clear that this had a massive impact. I don't know what the exact figures are. We're supposed to be getting a briefing from someone from the Ministry of Oil this evening. But you know, they make absolutely clear that this is a very big problem, and one of the sort of implicit threats in the speech yesterday, and probably one of the more seriously meant threats, was that, you know, if British and other companies pull out of Libya and pull out their staff out of Libya, then, you know, they will go and do deals with other people like China and India. And I think that's a credible threat. I mean, they are feeling it. They are very, very bothered. They would like the foreign workers to come back. And when you go around, I mean, this is a place that relied very, very heavily on foreign labor, especially Egyptian and Tunisians, and they have gone. I mean, it's been gutted of what was once a large part of its worker population. And, you know, for you know, hotels, businesses, this is having a huge impact.
Two last questions. One, you were in Egypt, Tahrir Square. How does this compare? Can you compare it to any phase of the uprising there?
It's so different. I mean, I actually started my journey off in Tunisia. So I went from Tunisia to Cairo, to Tahrir Square, and then went home for a couple of weeks and then came here. I mean, it feels different. I mean, in Cairo, it was absolutely clear that the very large part of the population were against the regime and felt prepared to come out. Here in Tripoli, in the capital, the difference is that there is a lot of support for the regime, and also that where there isn't support for their regime, they don't have sufficient sort of gravity of numbers to actually make an impact by coming out on the streets. And when we go out of Tripoli, I mean, you can see that it's ringed by armor. I mean, I went out 2 days ago to a government-controlled town up the coast, and you know, there are at one stage in a few kilometers there were about 12 modern tanks from one of the personal brigades. There were 6 BM-21 Grad launchers pointing at Zawiya, you know, and checkpoints everywhere, stopping cars going in and out of the city. And that's the difference. I mean, Cairo, massive, 20 million people. You know, when they came out, they made a real impact on what was going on. Here, we just haven't seen the same thing in the capital.
And the no-fly zone in 30 seconds, what it would mean, this debate over whether a no-fly zone should be imposed over Libya.
I'm not one usually to agree with U.S. defense secretaries, but I think he's absolutely right in this case. I mean, for a no-fly zone to work would require multiple airstrikes against all sorts of things, including airfields, radar sites, mobile anti-aircraft missile launchers. I mean, this would not be a small job. It would be very visible, and you know, there's a very, very strong possibility that this would actually unite some people behind Gaddafi who perhaps would not be united behind him, and actually make the situation worse here.
Peter Beaumont, we want to thank you very much for being with us, Foreign Affairs Editor at The Observer, speaking to us from Tripoli. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report back.